So yeah, as you can see from the title of the video, this one is just going to be about female kind of related Halloween kind of people, dark characters from history, mainly misunderstood obviously, because that's kind of how this all goes, isn't it, really? I'm not going to waffle on for loads in the introduction because it's not really necessary, is it? So we'll just get into it. So first up, we're going to start with the first woman, officially the first woman, and that is of course Lilith. Now there's lots of kind of conflicting stories. Now we'll kind of move on to a character from a show, actually Lilith from Sabrina, because I think she's a fairly good representation. But yeah, anyway, Lilith was the first woman, and the reason that she was kind of discarded and thrown out of the Garden of Eden is because she refused to copulate with Adam in the way that he demanded. So that made her kind of, not subservient like a woman should be according to the Bible. We all know this nonsense. So yeah, she was discarded and went to live outside the Garden of Eden before Eve was made with Adam's rib, because Lilith was made equally. That didn't work for Christianity or this Christian God, because she must be subservient. So Eve was made from the rib, part of Adam. Anyway, there's lots of stories about her, that she's kind of the first vampire, that she stole babies, that she was some sort of sexual succubus, a kind of devil. But in Sabrina, the kind of revamped version, she is the first woman, but she's also the wife of Satan, or Lucifer, which kind of makes sense, I suppose. He's a charming guy, a rebel. She was a rebel to not having this nonsensical sexist, misogynistic crap. So in the series, she's kind of a mysterious woman. She's living as a human. She does eventually become the Queen of Hell, as she should be, really, as they fool Lucifer. And yeah, so what I've picked for Lilith, I'm not going to go massively into detail with all of these, is 4160 Tuesdays, Red Queen. Now this is a kind of slightly bitter, dark red rose with a blood red rose and everything running through it. It's basically lots of roses, sweet and naughty and sharp, and it's got this, it does have, I think it has a bit of vanilla to kind of calm it a bit, and it's just it's a really magnificent kind of fragrance, and it suits her a lot, given she is the queen of a red kingdom, isn't she, as such. So yeah, that's 4160 Tuesdays, Red Queen for Lilith. Now Carmilla is the next one, and she comes from a book called Carmilla. There's probably films made about it, I don't know, but she's kind of the first seductive kind of vampiric woman in literature. Well, big in literature, I'm sure there was more, but yeah, written by an Irish, but I can't remember the name off the top of my head. I'll flash that up anyway. But yeah, she's basically this young, we don't know how young, I suppose probably a late teens kind of age, and she belongs to this family who everyone's scared of, and she comes from a rich family, and it's kind of hidden obviously who she is, because yeah, you don't want to be out like you're a vampire, do you? So she kind of goes to stay with this family, this new family that have moved in, and she seduces the daughter basically, and the daughter becomes very melancholy and stuff as she gets bitten and drained, but without really knowing, and it kind of all protective in this. But obviously she comes back later in the story when they've sort of realised who she is, because there are portraits in the house of this family in this abandoned village, this evil village. And she comes back, and she also has a daughter who was her age, and they figure out who she is, etc, etc. Seductive. Well, I suppose she's kind of implied to be a lesbian vampire in there. It's not really, you know, it's written in the 19th century, so it's not, don't worry. And what I have picked for her as a fragrance is Velvet Orchid from Tom Ford. The reason I've gone for Velvet Orchid is obviously because she's supposed to be quite youthful, and the velvet kind of thing does relate to that kind of vampirical kind of thing. It does smell kind of purple as well. I think we all know this. It's lots of florals going through it. It's got a little bit of a tiny bit of a naughty muskiness. Is the leather? Maybe. Off the top of my head. And it's just like, it's the friendlier version of Black Orchid. Nothing's as dark and dense, but it still has that dark, seductive kind of feel about it. It's a very enjoyable, very nice indeed fragrance, and I just think it kind of works for Carmilla. So that's Velvet Orchid for Carmilla, the one of the first vampiresses in literature. Next we're going to go for Wednesday, from the series Wednesday, you know, spin-off of the Addams Family, if you like, Jenna Ortega kind of Wednesday. Now Wednesday, in whatever she's in, is quite glum, quite standoffish or whatever, but obviously in Wednesday, the TV series, she's an adult, so they make her more grown up, more appealing, if you like, more kind of going through young grown up people's type things, although she tries to avoid obviously all them sorts of things. And she's obviously into writing, you know, spooky stories, doing spooky things. She's into pain and all the things you associate with Wednesday, being a bit of a sociopath and that. And she's kind of, as she's starting to grow up, she does start to get a bit of style and a bit of elegance about her, and they have her in some amazing outfits actually in the show. And what I've gone for is Guerlain's Black Perfecto. Now this is, as we know, dark leather, cherry, little kind of hints of this gorgeous musk going through it. It's just, is the rose? There's obviously other florals, but this is a kind of dark scent again, where it's black but with this shards of red going through it, which kind of is always something a little bit gothy and a little bit interesting and a little bit exciting, isn't it? So for Wednesday, from Wednesday, we've gone for Guerlain's Black Perfecto. Next is another vampire from the series of films. Never watched the fourth one ever, or the third one really, it's not very good. But Underworld. Now Selene is a very old vampire, although she's living in modern times. She wears really tight kind of leather outfits, and she's her and herself is quite seductive and what have you, and that's because she's played by Kate Beckinsale. She isn't in the second one, is she? Because that's about his daughter. But anyway, in the first one she kind of develops an understanding of where she came from a little bit, and that obviously the head vampire Victor had killed all of her family, so she becomes more sympathetic towards the Lycans, werewolves, and she's basically working with, I can't remember his name in it, but she's working with him to kind of bring down Victor and get a revenge on them. In the second film she's not in the third film she meets some sort of mixture of the two species. And then the fourth film, they're just writing a film to have a sequel. Yes, it's quite awful, but yeah, Selene is quite a strong, powerful woman. Obviously quite seductive, very kind of in charge and good at what she does. So what I've gone for her is Tom Ford's Tuscan leather. We all know this. Now this has got a bit more of a rugged leather feel about it, which I think suits her more than an overly soft plush leather. And obviously it's got that raspberry, it's got this naughtiness in it, the blood on the teeth. And even though you see the blood in the teeth, the reflection and the sparkle in her eye is quite seductive. So that's Tuscan leather from Tom Ford for Selene from Underworld. Next is another vampiress, and that's Drusilla from Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Now she's one of the best characters in it. She's wonderfully portrayed actually. She's a completely demented, mental, broken vampire. Because when she was changed, she was quite melancholy and mentally ill. So everything is a bit of a struggle for her. She has to go through eternity depressed and confused and needy, and that's what she ultimately is really. Through it all. And she's again, she's a vampire. She's quite seductive and what have you as well. You know, quite attractive, and she plays off different men and vampires against each other. She kind of plays the kind of meek and whatever to draw people in for sympathy, which is probably one of the more vicious, sadistic, cruel of the vampires. So what I've picked for her is Amor from One Way Bridge. Now this is a new one, I haven't spoken much about it yet. It's about some Italian ladies making wine with the grapes, and the main note is kind of the grape. There's this kind of very human, animalic muskiness, and the sweat and that. And again, I think Drusilla will kind of really smell like that. Obviously the red wine connection, that kind of seductive reddish purple kind of feel. And obviously she's a vampire, she's probably not going to smell perfectly lovely all the time for obvious reasons. And I think it kind of all goes together really nicely. So for Drusilla from Buffy the Vampire Slayer is that one. Next we have Theodora from The Wizard of Oz. Are we got to talk about the Mila Kunis version? Yeah, let's face it. Obviously she first came into our lives in The Wizard of Oz, and she was the evil wicked witch of the West. That's exactly what she did, and she had stripy socks. Or did she have stripy? Well, whatever. Anyway, in the kind of the Magnificent Oz or whatever it's called, the film with Mila Kunis in, it gives them all kind of the stories of where they come from and all of that. And obviously she started off as quite a sweet, lovely girl, but her evil sister was poisoning her, and then she becomes like a sort of hideous, well, she's not hideous, but a green thing, and she gets very angry and she's rejected, and it all goes a bit kind of wrong really. So she's full of rage and revenge and whatever. And what I've picked for her, first of all because it's very green, but it also has that medicinal kind of witchiness I suppose about it, is Elan Vital from To the Fairest London. And it is this walk round a kind of dark, damp forest. There's an almost licoriciness about it. There's a herbaceousness about it, but a dark herbaceousness. There's kind of nettles in there, and it's not really lavender or licorice, but you get that kind of feel about it. All kind of, you know, things that would go into making spells and all that jazz and potions. So that's why I think it's absolutely perfect for Theodora. So for Theodora is Elan Vital. from To the Fairest. Next is one of the darkest kind of misunderstood characters of modern times in one of the biggest shows. That's Cersei from Game of Thrones. Now obviously in the end she turns up, she ends up, oh god, look, we haven't got to the ends in the books. In the series she kind of goes a bit kind of power crazy, and after she's lost all her kids and she's a bit kind of mad. Let's try to remember the character she was before they destroyed her. And she's kind of, again, she's one of these very, very powerful women. She's very vindictive, she's very cruel, she's very single-minded. I mean, ultimately she's trying to protect her kids, which is quite a noble cause, isn't it, and maintain a family. But obviously she's kind of misrepresented and kind of looked down upon because she's a woman. And obviously this just emboldens her, and she uses her sexuality to get what she wants. When she becomes queen, she kills all of her enemies at any cost, and I mean literally any cost. And she kind of rules with an iron fist and fear, and she's got nothing left to lose. So she's quite, she's quite a formidable character, as we all know. And what I've picked for her is Purple Heart from Map of the Heart, which is a smoky violet. It's a little bit like a very grown-up version of Lolita Lempica, in the sense it's got some of the same notes in the fruit, the violet, but this is darker. It's got smoke and it's got ink. You know, the ink gives a blackness, and the smoke is like the smouldering city and wreck that she's left behind her. And I just think it suits her really well with the violet and that seductive kind of magic about her. So for Cersei is Purple Heart from Map of the Heart. The next up we have Hel, who is like the keeper of dead souls and the keeper of hell, the hell realm if you like, in Norse Viking mythology, mainly Norse mythology. She is the daughter of Loki, and ultimately she's left to kind of tend for the dead. So yeah, obviously Hel's portrayed as quite terrifying, but at the same time, to look after the dead, lost souls, she must be quite peaceful, and I suppose she will be quite dark. And she's portrayed as having half of her is dead, like a skeletal kind of thing, and half of her is an alive, beautiful woman, and that. And anyway, what I've picked for her is Marbet from Ellis, which is one I've just recently tried, and I think it kind of suits her perfectly. The sharp, bitter florals, the beauty's bitter, it's got a bite, and then the kind of animalic, raw, dirty muskiness about it. Is it cumin and what have you? And they go together to make, I think, a perfect representation of Hel, in the fact that, you know, she might be a little bit beautiful and she's a woman and, you know, blah 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 and all that jazz that they'd have believed, quite nurturing and seductive, but at the same time she's very dark and very harrowing and very powerful. Like Norse mythology, the women aren't, you know, your little stay-at-home cooking in the kitchen Christian nonsense types. So I just think they go together very well. So for Hel is Marbet from Ellis Perfumes. I've picked another person from Buffy just because, you know, keep it light, and she's quite amusing, I suppose, in her own kind of way. And that is Glory, who is actually a god who's trapped in this place because she needs the key to get back home to her realm or whatever. But she's basically in the body of like a spoilt, preppy, teeny American. So she's all down for the ridiculous fashion and boys, and she gets angst, and she's, you know, a bit like Alicia Silverstone from Clueless, you know, that kind of personality, a bit of a div. She's not really the sharpest tool in the box in that, but she's an all-powerful god. So yeah, and she can be quite cruel as well, and she doesn't really see, because obviously she's a god, she doesn't really see anyone else as anything but ants or whatever. And she has another side of her. We're not going to get into that. Anyway, what I have picked for her is Parfum de Marly's Delina, in the fact that it's something somebody of that type would wear. You know, it's really generic, it's really obvious, it's really sharp and bitter and shampooy and generic. It's nothing flash and special, but it's kind of one that you'd show off, because hey, look at me, I'm wearing this really famous Delina that everyone talks about. And that's kind of what it is. I don't need to go into too much depth. So for glory, it's Parfums de Marly's Delina. So yeah, another to end it, we'll end it with a kind of quite a famous one, based on a kind of real life person, and that's Elizabeth Bathory, who was is that how you say it? Probably. Who was like a Hungarian, Slovakian, Transylvanian princess, that kind of region. Her family were from Transylvania, which may be important as we kind of go through it. And she was accused of being a serial killer, without any evidence whatsoever, but again, we'll get into that. Apparently she killed over 600 people and 300 people, more likely 50-60 people, and obviously she's very famous for that. Now the trial was all of her servants. She wasn't called to trial. A lot of the people who gave evidence were handsomely rewarded. It was also perhaps a Protestant religion caused a bit of an issue in that area. Also, the Habsburgs owed her family an awful lot of money from loans, which were then mysteriously written off after the trial. So yeah, it sounds like another one of these stories. Let's pick on a very wealthy aristocratic person, and obviously through modern eyes and the more we know, it does all sound like absolute utter nonsense. However, she was part of a noble family, and kind of being very abusive, or you know, almost sadistic towards your servants or people who committed crimes, if you were noble people, was quite commonplace, and she would have grown up around that. Her defence for the trial, because she had, what was it called, a gynatorium, where basically to educate and what have you, young women. Loads of them had died, but her defence was it was cholera, and then she blamed the servants or something, and it was that was all a bit wishy-washy. So maybe she had killed and tortured several people, but perhaps not as many as she was accused of. Well, the truth is, we'll never know, will we, really? And these sorts of things were commonplace, weren't she? A rich lady who owned a lot of land, a lot of power, which that, you know, the Holy Roman Emperor wanted, and you know, all this and that. Now, why she's also important is this was, you're talking in the mid 18th century onwards. There's the stories of her bathing in the blood of the young victims to maintain her youth, and this kind of idea of vampirism, and you know, she was eating the flesh of these young kids and stuff. None of this was in the trial. This was 100 years after, and again, obviously these things kind of stick, and it makes me wonder, because Bram Stoker's Dracula is not based on Vlad the Impaler. Was it based on someone like her, like a wealthy noblewoman who did things like this? And it came out obviously before that was written. It's the right area. It's, I suppose, the same with Vlad the Impaler from that kind of Transylvanian area. But there's never been anything about vampirism related to him. And again, I mentioned this in a video I'm doing. There is no real connection between the two, Vlad and vampirism and stuff. But there is with this woman, so maybe it did influence him. Anyway, I am waffling and waffling on because I find these things so fascinating. What I've picked for her is Bouquet d'Automne from Maison Violet. And the reason I've picked that is obviously it's the purple, the iris, you know, some beautiful countess with probably very toxic makeup and whatnot, and beautiful flower perfume which the men would have wore as well because there was no gender in fragrance, modern construct, and you know, that kind of thing. You associate purple and flowers with that kind of blue royal blood kind of thing, don't you? But mainly because it's so sad. It's such a mauve kind of coloured one as well. It's the autumn, the leaves, the last of the colours falling, that kind of calm, melancholy air, and you know, it's that whole kind of thing. And again, none of these rumours about her particularly started till after her husband died. Again, it makes you wonder, getting the land off the wealthy lady, doesn't it? And yeah, she had. It's very, I think personally, it is very likely she did abuse her staff, because that's what they did. That's what the nobility and the wealthy still do. I mean, what does Jeff Bezos do? He works people to death, pays no tax, gives them pennies, whilst he has more money than everyone in the entire world could spend. So it still goes on, doesn't it? So I imagine there's a lot of truth in that, and maybe that's why they hated her. But whether she started killing loads of them, maybe she did kill some by going overboard with her punishments and that. But whether she was a mass murderer, she certainly didn't kill 600 people. I mean, there's literally no evidence in that other than what one person said. And of course she was reported originally by a local priest. Was he a Lutheran priest, which would kind of again go with the religion thing. And that's it. Yeah, sorry, this has been a very long one to end it, but I just think it's one of the more fascinating ones. And obviously with her being associated with vampirism, even though it was 100 years after her existence, is a perfect kind of character for Valentine's, for Halloween, isn't she? So that's Elizabeth Bathory, or Bathroom, whatever. And Maison Violet's Bouquet d'Automne. So yeah, it was just a little video, if you could even hear it over the rain, of just kind of powerful Halloweeny women with a bad rep, but you know, are actually really powerful and really interesting and stuff. Not all of them are portrayed in a bad way, but we know how this world is. Some great ones from popular culture and from old stories and myths, etc. So a nice old mix there. Who's your kind of favourite female Halloweeny time character? Who else would you have put in this list? How would you scent them with fragrances and that? Alright folks, don't need to waffle on. Thanks, bye.